What is going on, everybody? We are back once again with another edition of Wrestling Republic Spotlight. We have an awesome interview lined up for everybody today. I am so fired up. Can't do this without my co-host, though. First and foremost, let me introduce to you. They call him the Tuesday Night Delight. Out in the DMV, it's Shoddy. What's going on?
What's going on, Clark? It's your boy Shoutouts Graps, and we are back with another installment of the Wrestling Republic Spotlight. I'm super excited for this one, man. I've been anticipating for this guest that we have, and yeah, I'll let you go ahead and do the honors to introduce him.
We have an awesome guest here today. We've got SMU alumni, director, NFL Films, the director of WWE Unreal on Netflix, Chris Weaver. How are you today, my friend?
Doing great, fellas. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's jump right into it, man. What a successful first season it was. I enjoyed it. I watched it basically all in one run at it myself. It was awesome. As far as your experience in filming it, coming from other sports, NFL stuff in the past, was it just crazy unique because the culture is so different? There had to be sort of a culture shock at first, right?
I think unique, yes. Culture shock, I wouldn't describe it as a culture shock, but it was definitely like special. Like walking into that, like I knew what WWE was like the magnitude of what they do and their storytelling. I didn't know much about the rosters, the storylines. I mean, very little actually, almost no rosters and storyline info going in. But I knew that WWE is the real deal. So it was extremely special. And when when we first met with them, and they're like, if we're going to do this, we're going to open our doors as wide as we can for you. And it's like you never know what that really means until you start walking through those doors. And once we did, they were very open, and I knew right away, like, this is something special. They're really like, letting us get behind the curtain and go really far. So unique, yes. Culture shock, a little. I think they thought it was going to be more of a culture shock for us than we actually did, because we're kind of used to that. There's a lot of carryover in like what the cultures are like for football and what they're like for wrestling. It's different, but there's a lot of similarities. So I think that really helped us mesh.
That makes a ton of sense too. And I didn't even really think about that. You look at the roster and it's a lot of ex-athletes. So I can imagine it's a locker room very similar to a locker room you've been in.
You honestly may have seen some people that you got to produce on the gridiron that are probably in the locker room now. Funny enough.
What's funny, like one of the adjustments was just getting used to everybody's running around with like no shirt on and like a lot less clothing. Like that was honestly one of the most like, well, this is a little different, but you're just having like a normal conversation like we are, but they're wearing like trunks which are like underpants or so that was a little bit. You ask about a culture shock, that was a little bit of it, but we got over that pretty quickly, and now it's just part of the norm.
100%. I mean, it had to be one of those things that, for so many kids, basically that's their dream come true, to be backstage at WWE. It had to be sort of wild when you're pre-match, the intensity level, when it sort of switches, they start oiling up and everything, like you said, and then you're having a conversation there or putting the camera on them. Those had to be some of the wilder situations for sure. Shad, go ahead. I know you had another question you wanted to ask for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, to kind of piggyback off of the first question, I enjoyed the series a lot, and I guess one thing that I had in particular is that there was a lot of let's say uncertainty about the documentary before it obviously unveiled on Netflix. How was that? Was it challenging to kind of know that you are going into uncharted territories and you have a lot of question marks about the art of kayfabe meets reality, and kind of peeling back of a little bit more of the realism of the professional wrestling landscape that some people kind of want to hold tight and want to make it feel like it's its whole separate make-believe world, but they believe that it is that make-believe world in a sense.
Yeah, we knew going in, and even WWE had kind of indicated, there's going to be a chunk of fan, there's going to be a chunk of audience that's probably going to not really love the idea of a show like this, and there might even be and we knew there might even be talent or employees. Like we kind of again went in I wouldn't say on eggshells, but very careful and aware that this was a unique thing that nobody had really done to this level, and that the business for a long time was built on kayfabe, which again, I didn't even know what that term meant going in. I mean, I knew a little bit, but and I had seen other shows, like I had seen, what's it called? I think it's just called Wrestlers on Netflix, about the was that OVW down in with Al Snow, and so I knew a little bit about the culture through shows like that, and so that was helpful as well. But we did know that there might be people that didn't love this sort of thing. But I think, to spin it forward a little bit, when the show, was dropped and commentary started happening and there was response, I don't often read a bunch of that stuff, just because it's like, once I've done the thing, there's nothing I can do about it at that point. And it's like, we've made our decisions, But this one was so different and unique. I was like, I kind of want to see what the world is saying about it. And I was pleasantly surprised, like, how positive it was. There's always going to be people that are negative about anything, frankly, and so, especially when they're passionate about it, like I know wrestling fans are. I knew that there was going to be some of that, and there is some of that, but it wasn't nearly as skewed in the negative side of it as I thought it would be. It was a lot more positive, and a lot of people. The best comment I can read or hear for somebody tell me, which I've heard a lot, is, I hated the idea of this show, but now that I've seen it, I'm into it. I love it. And again, that's like the highest compliment.
Can I tell you something? I'm on record before the documentary came out saying, I don't know how I feel about this. I was one of those people. I can sit here today, and I'm not saying this because I have you on air with us. I think you guys did such a tremendous job with it, where I think it peeled back just enough. And the one thing I loved about it was the realism that you got. You got to humanize these wrestlers. And I think as wrestling fans, honestly, you need to kind of see them in a different light sometimes. Like episode 2 was my favorite one, the one where you kind of show Chelsea Green in a light, with all that she's going through. Charlotte Flair, especially all the criticism that she gets online. Like, I think you guys did such a wonderful job to kind of show who they are as people more than who they are as wrestlers, which I think sometimes people forget in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I think that was sort of another pleasant surprise for me was in that episode you're talking about. When people come up to us now, or they call us, or they ask us for interviews, or whatever, I was really surprised at how many people said that's their favorite episode. It's, for a little clarity, I'm named the director on the show, and I'm obviously heavily involved, but we also have a showrunner named Eric Powers, and he's sort of going into the project. We were kind of opposites on this, meaning he is a diehard fan with like an encyclopedic knowledge of the wrestling world, WWE. And so, what I'm getting at is that episode that focuses mostly on the women, or entirely on the women. That was like one of his babies. He had his hands all over that episode, and I did very little on that episode. He was working with another editor producer named Jason Weber, but they crushed it. And more people, it was sort of a surprise. I love 4, the heel turn episode, which comes right after the episode you're talking about, Shad. That's my favorite, and will probably stay that way. And I thought most people would feel that way. But man, I've gotten 90% of the people that have come up to me, both internally at NFL Films, people like, we didn't know what to expect. We're watching it, friends, family, everybody, a lot of people saying that's the best of their favorite episode, because it does start to really peel back. You get a little more, you get a lot of the glitz and a lot of the celebration early on in the series. And then you start to get a little more deeper into what it's like to really be a wrestler. And yeah, Chelsea, Charlotte, they really helped drive that home.
The 4th episode, the heel turn episode, like you mentioned, it might be my favorite, but 2 is up there for sure. I think that one is outstanding. And like you said, highlighting Chelsea and Charlotte, and I mean, even Bianca as well, I believe, right? In that one, or is Bianca in 3?
That's actually all 3. The women, that's all in 3, but yes, they're, like I said, everybody seems to be latching onto that episode.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're not going to throw anybody under the bus, but is there anybody in particular? We talked about the kayfabe, the potential pushback and whatnot, that was overly welcoming, or the easiest, the most fun that you're willing to mention? Was there anybody that welcomed you with open arms?
Well, what I'd say that is total sweetheart. One of my favorite scenes in the series, and that's Chris Park, Abyss. He, like, from the beginning he's just what you see. And a lot of people were commenting on that, like online, which was great to see, about how he looks like a genuine sweetheart, good dude, 100%. Like he's like, there's certain people there, like, again, I've been saying this a lot to a lot of different people. Like, I can't tell you how warm and welcoming everybody, I mean, to a person has been from the top down. And I look forward to going to the events and going backstage and like just being around, not just like the superstars, which, you know, are obviously great to be around, but people like Chris Park. Like, I look forward to like getting on the road, going to see Chris Park, talk, you know, just chatting him. And he was always like, man, I love, I love doing this with you guys. You know, whatever you need, let me know. He was one, for example. And then like Chelsea, she's like our hero, man. Like, Chelsea is so just, I mean, that's who she is. Like, all the time, she's just switched on that way. And it's like, whatever you need, guys, I'm here to do it. And she's eager and like, but again, it's hard to just, that's the name a couple, but man, everybody we work with, again, even people nobody knows, like behind the scenes type people, are just awesome to work with. And so I really look forward when we can get out and go work with them.
That's so cool. You mentioned Chris Park Abyss, because I grew up watching TNA and he was such a menacing character and whatnot, and he didn't speak. And the first time, you know, I've heard him he's done a few things on camera for the WWE and whatnot over the years, where you see him but not a ton of talking. And I was sitting there, I'm like, why wasn't Chris Park as Abyss cutting promos back in the day? I'm like, this guy's super, super delightful to listen to.
Would have been the ultimate baby face compared to what his character entering with Abyss was. Maybe that's why, but yeah.
He's definitely an unreal, a WWE unreal babyface, no doubt, Sean.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like when they first started playing him and I heard him talk, I'm like, this was the guy that used to do the Monsters balls? Like, he did all the thumbtacks and the barbed wire. I'm like, no way. He sounds just like such a sweetheart, like you said before. Absolutely. So that tickles me for that one. As far as that was bad. As far as the series ending with episode 5, I went to Money in the Bank. They do have at the end on Netflix, it says more episodes to come. Is there anything there? Maybe I don't want to ask for inside baseball here, but
so yes, there's more episodes to come. I can't detail it a whole lot, you know, but I can tell you there's more happening. We're working on it now, and you will see more WWE Unreal on Netflix for sure.
That is exciting, and I'm glad you said that, because I won't ask, because I was at WrestleMania this year, and then I was at Money in the Bank, and I really wasn't paying attention when I got to episode 5, and I was like, oh man, I can't wait. That Money in the Bank episode's probably coming up next.
I think you'll be your dreams will come true about Money in the Bank. Let's put it to you that way.
Awesome.
You just got to wait a little bit.
Absolutely. Definitely excited about that. Shotty, what do you have?
So also to speak about that, and you mentioned working with a lot of, working on the likes of Chelsea and Abyss. How is it working with someone like Paul Levesque, Triple H, kind of seeing how he runs his operation? He's someone that has been, a savior to a lot of wrestling fans in a sense, because taking over to the WWE and with the creative process. But how is it kind of seeing how he operates from afar and just how he runs his ship out in the WWE?
So I usually call him Hunter. He goes by a bunch of different names, which is why we ended up doing that gimmick at the beginning of the series, because it's like, what do you call a guy like that that's got so many names? But I generally call him Hunter. And so working with Hunter, like, I could tell you from the very beginning, I was blown away at how busy this guy is. Like, I've never been around somebody busier than Hunter. Like, I've been around NFL owners, and not maybe to this degree, but I've been around a lot of NFL owners. I've been around a lot of like CEO types and just really busy people, but I've never witnessed somebody that's just really like 24 hours a day when he's not sleeping, he's worrying about or thinking about the business, and not just, the creative, but a lot of the business part of it too, it seems. So that's the first thing. But at the same time, when you have time with Hunter, he's like the ultimate at disarming you. Like, he is so warm and so just likable. And I love talking to him. I mean, both on camera and off. He's an incredibly good interview. Like all the talent in the show, the interviews are just unbelievably good by my measure, at least. and Hunter is one of them. Like, I just love talking, and he loves to talk and talk about the business and talk about the creative. Like, he truly just is wrestling and loves the wrestling. And so it's been kind of a privilege to do that. I mean, it's an absolute privilege. And look, I'm even like learning through, you try to learn in your life every day and what you do, like just watching him as a leader and him as a creative force. Like, that's all stuff I want to do here. Like, we're creative here. We have to lead teams. And so I've also just been learning from him as a sort of a human and a creator, just spending time with him and like, we're just watching footage of him and how he operates. Like, anyway, it's a lot to say that I love working with the guy, and I've learned a lot from him, both creatively and just as how to operate as a human and a leader.
That's so cool. And I love that you mentioned the creative aspects, especially given what you do, directing and whatnot. I thought one of the most fascinating things was the writer's room. Like, it really is like a Knights of the Round Table situation, and you don't really expect it to actually look like that. I wasn't ever sure, you always kind of picture in the back of your mind, like, how are they writing these? Are they phone calls? What's going on here? No, like, it is the big conference room table. Those had to be some of the more tense moments, I feel like, in filming, because that's where it gets dicey. What was your thoughts on like the writer's room, that room in particular, and what that was like? And another just random tidbit, how long would you say weekly they're in that type of a meeting about creative?
So one of the first things we asked them about doing when we were meeting with them about, making the series, we're like, we really want to put robotic cameras in your writer's room. And it didn't take them long to say, yep, you can do that. And from the first time, we rolled on that. Like, I remember we got the footage in, and I and showrunner Eric Powers, we immediately went and turned it on just to kind of see it, feel it, hear. We had no idea what to expect. We obviously had physically been in the room, but didn't know what it looked like with people in it. Like, we scouted it and like figured out where to place cameras and all that stuff with our DP, Ben Johnson. So when we finally got actual footage, it was like, I'm trying to think of like an apt, analogy. I couldn't wait to see it as much as any piece of footage I've ever brought in. And it was like the first thing we filmed with them was a writer's room. And so when we turned it on and they had the whiteboards and it sort of had their season laid out, it was like, this is it. We are seeing something that very few people are privy to. And I remember going like, we've got something really special here. We knew the robos were going to be valuable in the writer's room, and like seeing it with, in the flesh, so to speak, for the first time was like, wow, this is real. In terms of how much time they spend in there, I mean, you probably have to ask them to get an exact number, but I could tell you that like when they do have meetings, they're long, they're pretty long. They're like 4 to 6 hour type meetings. And, they have meetings for Raw, they have meetings for SmackDown, they have long-term meetings where they sort of go over the whole calendar. And, we shoot quite a bit of them. We don't shoot every single meeting, but we shoot a lot of them. And it's like a great way to absorb how they, come up with their creative and what their arcs might be. And, how to deploy those in the series is also its own, like, way to figure that out, because it's a meeting, and meetings can be a little, not necessarily great television, but it's like we need to deploy these judiciously and make sure we're getting the right material in there, which I think we nailed, and I think it really is a big part of what made Unreal special.
100%, man. I mean, I got a funny story. I'm watching that first episode with my buddy. The first scene in the writer's room, he looks at me and he goes, "Dude, this is like having a beer at lunch." Like, it feels like you're like. It was great. It made me laugh so hard. I'm like, it is. It was like you're kind of not supposed to be in there, not supposed to be doing it. It was perfect. I loved it. What would you say was the most difficult thing when it came to filming, without getting into too big of specifics or like naming people, but the most difficult part of the filming process?
I think that's a great question. I don't know how to frame that. The most difficult part of filming. It's when it. I think the most difficult thing is like something like the heel turn. Like, that was such a big story and had to be kept so secret for them that, that's like one of the few things we just had no knowledge of whatsoever. So when I found out, I mean, I was in Toronto for Chamber, and it was like, I went into Chamber thinking that Cody was going to turn heel that night. And that, not through them, it was just sort of my hunch, and where they were headed with the story. It just made a lot of sense that he was going to turn heel. And then obviously, he did the thing in New Orleans with Rock, and they were sort of setting it up. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what's going to happen. And we've been sort of told it's going to be a big show. You don't want to miss it. You might want to, they were giving us some sort of breadcrumbs, but without telling us explicitly. So when I found out, like 15 minutes before that it was actually going to happen, I was like, shit, we don't have, like, what are we going to do in an Access show that we don't have what I knew was going to be the biggest story of the year now? So that was like an example of a challenge. Like, all right, we have this incredible story beat. How do we make it work in the series? And so, but these challenges and these boundaries in any sort of filmmaking, for me, at least, my belief is when you're doing these documentaries and doc series, follow series, like these boundaries and create, and these challenges create they create ideas, and the boundaries lead creation, and you sort of have to create through necessity. And so again, knowing that we had to take something that we didn't have much on and turn it into in what I think is sort of the most compelling and part of the series. I mean, that's an example of something that was really challenging to pull off, and I think we did it.
Oh, that's amazing, especially after seeing the series, knowing that you had to basically be on your toes. You're like, all of a sudden, now this is the most important footage, and you didn't get the heads up about it. It wasn't something that you knew about in advance. That's amazing and incredible that you're able to pull
I'll
that
give you
off.
another. It's less about capture and execution, more just like about philosophy on the series, which is to say, another big challenge was trying to balance, like, the avid fan, the avid wrestling fan, and what they know and what their expectations are, and balance that out with like the newcomer that knows absolutely nothing about it. And again, that was part of the cool thing about the dynamics, having me as director and Eric Powers as showrunner, is him being the expert. He could be like, this is red meat for wrestling fans. And I can say, yeah, but we need to clarify because you can get lost if you don't know Roman Reigns, the bloodline. There's a lot of intricacies to their storytelling. And so that was another challenge, was sort of balancing it out and like feeling where are we giving too much information and dumbing it down versus where are we not giving enough to sort of, usher in like a newcomer, so that was another big challenge for us.
That makes a ton of sense. Anyway, Shadi, what do you got?
So after doing this, obviously, you mentioned that this was kind of new to you. Have you gained a sense of appreciation, obviously, with working on it, but have you become a fan of pro wrestling now after doing this series? Do you like watch the weekly shows? Do you follow the product more extensively as like a fan?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I had a knowledge and a respect for their storytelling going in, but I don't think I really, understood how deeply and how important the storytelling is. Like, I guess when I thought of wrestling, my brain immediately thought, the physicality in the ring first and then story. And I think what I learned is it's the exact opposite to me. I mean, that's my point of view. I don't know if, how other people feel about it, but I do feel like, well, if you go watch the highlights, the Raw highlights from the night before, or the SmackDown highlights from the night before, if they're 15 minutes, like, 80% of it is not the physicality, right? Like that's sort of the tail of the dog. They're using the story to drive it. And so I learned through the process that, they view this as just episodic fictional narrative television. Like they have to produce a new episode, twice a week, and it's 52 weeks a year. And it's like they have to constantly be creating story and driving story and arcing story. So that, again, it gave me a more of appreciation for that. So, but to answer your question, yes, I've definitely become more of a wrestling fan, and just keeping up with the stories, and I'm now learning moves and like sort of what leads to what in the ring and the rhythm of matches, like all of it. But now, I know a lot of these people through working on the project, again, from Hunter to Chris Park to Bruce to CM Punk, like, I've different level of relationship with all these different people, but building relationship with so many of them. And again, behind the scenes, people you don't even know, all that leads to being like, yeah, I want to know what's going on in their world, and I want to be entertained, and they're better, as good as any product on television at entertaining. So yes, much bigger fan than I was going in. And I think it's one of those things that, I think it was CM Punk said this in the interview, and it's not in the series, but like, and maybe it was off camera, but how like once you get into wrestling at a certain level and it gets in your blood, like it doesn't, it's there forever. You know what I mean? And I could sort of see how that's the case. And like, and I don't want to veer off, except like I'm a huge bluegrass fan. I love bluegrass and old country music. And that's like, Sturgill Simpson, who's a country music star, and he did a couple bluegrass albums, and he sort of gave that when he released some bluegrass albums that were like pure bluegrass. That was sort of what he wrote to his audience. Like, I wanted to release these songs in a bluegrass format. They've been on my old albums, but you never heard them like this. And he gave this sort of long spiel about how, once bluegrass gets in your blood, it doesn't go away, which I fully agree with. I think wrestling is very similar in that regard. Like once you latch onto it, like it's part of you, forever.
It is definitely one of those things. There's the old cliche, like it's really hard to explain to someone that doesn't get it, and you don't have to explain to someone who does. It's one of those type of things. But I like how you frame that with once it's in your blood, you can't help it. And to your point, when you know the people too, you got a personal relationship. It's like, wait a minute, what did my friend do on Monday night? Not necessarily even, but as far as the storytelling thing too, like we were talking about earlier, the writing, the creative is so important. The in-ring storytelling is so important. One thing I found interesting, there wasn't a ton of specifics as far as laying out matches in it, and I love that was avoided, because that's a curtain that I thought would maybe be too far. Was that intentional or not so much?
You mean in terms of like step by stepping through matches?
Yeah, like even just like the specific to opponents, speaking about spots and whatnot. I was glad there wasn't a ton of that.
I'd say that, we tried to pick and choose when to get detailed in the matches, because to a certain degree, you don't want to spoil like what you're about to see just in our show. It's happened for the world in the audience, that's watching it live, or, on Raw, or, the PLE when it happens. But it's like, it's kind of like, when we cut big football games, we don't always, want to give away who won the game, even though you probably know. We still want to have a little bit of mystery within our series and in our show. So we are very careful about how we deploy, who's going to win a match, or how they're going to win the match, or what moves they're going to use to do it. So we are particular about how we use that sort of element.
That's very cool. That is very, very cool. As far as, obviously we talked about the fifth episode being, the final one, night 2, all of that. When it came to the Cody and Cena finish, and there was a little bit of criticism as far as wrestling fans on that, did you take that into consideration when you were cutting that one up, or did that sort of come later?
No, we did. We knew that the response to that wasn't overwhelmingly positive from wrestling fans, and so we asked them about it. We asked Hunter, we asked Cena about it, and the answers are in there. It was basically like this was deliberate. Like there's different types of heels, as you guys know. And again, I learned some through the process. And one heel type is to just take away everything and not, and like make everything, not compelling, or not give the audience what they want, by design. And that was sort of Cena's whole heel or his heel type was like to take things away, or like walk out of the ring and like not be the old John Cena through this removal instead of, adding per se. So, so they addressed it, and they made that, and I think they were like, this is all going somewhere. And again, you see you go, fast forward to SummerSlam, which is, not in our season 1 there, like that match is just unbelievable. And it sort of makes, and it's sort of, that's when you kind of, and again, this is something I've learned, is something might happen months later in a storyline, and you go, oh man, that's why they did this, what they did back in blah, blah, blah. So, maybe the SummerSlam match doesn't play as well if they don't handle it, the WrestleMania portion of it the way they did. So, we were aware of what the response was, and I think we addressed it pretty well in the series.
I think that's a great point too, and it's kind of funny because if you're watching regular episodic TV, right, the audience doesn't always go home happy, but they're also not in an arena to express it. So, right. So I think it's really cool and unique to wrestling, because it's basically, it's live performance art in some sense, right? Absolutely. Athletic performance art. That's essentially what it is, right? You have the opportunity to not only not send the crowd home happy, but it's a literal crowd. And, right. And so I did think it was really cool to have that addressed in episode 5. That's why I wanted to ask about that specifically, just because, it's hard when you're filming a company like the WWE that has a lot of pride too in their product, to sort of be that introspective after something like that. That was something I was really curious about, but I know, Shadi, you had another thing you wanted to ask as well.
Yeah, I guess you mentioned it earlier from the first of it, but obviously you have a extensive background of stuff you've got to work on. And one in particular is obviously a lot of stuff working with NFL and NFL films. How would you kind of, what's a little bit the biggest difference between working with NFL films compared working on a set with the WWE?
I think one thing that jumped out, especially early, I'm trying to remember who the very first actual formal sit-down interview, I think it was probably Hunter, but Punk was the one I remember doing early on. And like one of the differences I noticed right away in working with WWE versus the NFL is how just compelling, and I wouldn't say even necessarily polished, just how compelling these characters, the talent, the wrestlers are on camera. So like if you took whatever our weakest interview is, it's still like an 8 out of 10, on the 10 scale. So, one of the differences, and there's football players and athletes that are really good on camera. So I'm not trying to say that none of them are, but I just think the batting average, if you will, for when you put a talent in the chair, it's like every single person that we did a formal interview with was great. Every one of them. And it's like, I don't necessarily feel that way about every interview subject I get in football. And I've done, hundreds of interviews over 20, well, I don't even know how many years it's been now, like 23 years of here at NFL Films. Hundreds of interviews. And I would say that, my favorite interview ever now, let's say, prior to this, it would be hard to say. Like I had an incredible interview with Drew Pearson. He's a former Cowboy from the 70s. He was an incredibly emotional interview I did several years ago for a Football Life, a documentary on his life. But I can now safely say my favorite interview that I've ever done ever out of all the hundreds is Michael Hayes. Like I loved Michael Hayes, like from the minute we started talking, and I knew he was a character, but his interview was just like, I wanted to keep, like, for the sake of just the enjoyment of doing it, I wanted to keep going. And then I would say the same about Punk. Like that CM Punk interview was awesome. Like he gave us more time than we even asked for. And we were like, again, I just wanted to keep talking to the guy because I enjoyed the conversation so much. So again, one of the differences is just how good they are on camera. And again, not even that they're performing, just that they understand, what entertainment is and what looks good, what sounds good on camera. They're really good at it, So that's probably the biggest thing that jumped out at me.
That's super cool to hear too, especially because, charisma is such a big part of the job. So you kind of expect that, but mentioning that the being on all the time type thing, like CM Punk or Michael Hayes like that, that goes back to even what you're saying earlier, like it's in your blood, right? It never goes away there. I think it's really interesting. You mentioned Punk. He comes across so genuine and like he's having so much fun in the series. It's something I definitely didn't quite expect because, there's CM Punk very recently, obviously at the other company, there was some interesting stuff as far as that was concerned. He came across to me as one of the most fun and entertaining people on stage. I thought it was really cool because he's now at a stage of his career where he's almost like a mentor. Did you find that to be the case too?
Yes, to both of those things, which is to say, I did actually. So I mentioned I didn't know the roster at all. Like I don't think I knew a single one of the characters in our series except for CM Punk. I knew the name CM Punk, just enough to know the name. I don't even know if I knew what he looked like, but I knew the name, and I knew that he'd taken a lot of heat for past past promotions, and I would read these stories about how he was like all this negativity about him, and I never had a single negative encounter with him. He's one of those guys that I look forward, that I mentioned. I look forward to seeing people when we go to these events. He's one of them, man. He's near the top of the list. He and I look forward to meeting him. And every time we get there, we talk sports. I always ask him what he thinks of the Cubs at the moment or the Bears, whatever season we're in. And when I would read the stories of all the negativity, I'd be like, that's amazing how different what he's being portrayed by, here online and socials and in the press and all that relative to what I witnessed, when I was there. It was striking to me. And then, yes, the mentorship part. Yeah. He says that in the show, like it made the cut where he says, I'm on the back end, or Hunter says it maybe that he's on the back end of his career, just defined by age, but he's more of a player's coach now. Like he likes to coach. And it's funny. He used the analogy, and we didn't put it in the series because we didn't want to have to explain it. He used the analogy of Reg Dunlop from the movie Slapshot. And how, because Reg Dunlop, if you're not familiar with Slapshot, hockey movie,
absolutely,
the coaches, he plays on the ice for the team, and that was the analogy he used. And so we veered off for like 5 minutes talking about Slapshot, just goofing about it. And that's what I mean about how warm and like we hit it off, man. And he's my guy. Like everybody asks me, like, do you have a favorite wrestler now? And my favorite wrestler of all time now is Michael P.S. Hayes. My favorite active wrestler right now is CM Punk, and then probably Chelsea Green. Those are my favorites now because of my
I love that.
Because of my encounters with them and how good they are at their craft,
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, we're both pretty big Punk fans in general.
I'm born in Chicago, so I'm a huge Cubs, Bulls, Bears, the whole nine, fan of all Chicago sports and Hawks especially. But
one question though I want to ask, obviously, as we were talking about both worlds, if you could pick one of the wrestlers from the roster, who would you think would translate best as like a head of like the locker room kind of guy on the NFL team?
On an NFL team, who would be I mean, Cody calls himself the quarterback, like he's like the quarterback on the roster. So it's hard to not say Cody, who's another guy that just, I can't, what you see from Cody, like he is like buttoned up and is warm. And like, I've never heard him say no to anybody, not just us. Like he is so nice and like gets it. Like, it's not just like, that's the thing I can't, you hear that it's kind of a cliche that like wrestlers are just themselves turned up to 11 or they're cranked, I mean, that's another thing that I witnessed to be, I mean, by my measure, it's absolutely true. Like, so what I'm getting at with Cody is that's how nice he really is all the time. And it's like, you can't, I can't picture him like just being upset with anybody with like, or us, but calling himself the quarterback, he treats it that way. I think he'd be a heck of a locker room leader, but so would Punk, he's a, players coach, the old guard, like he gets the business probably better than anybody on the roster, at least by my measure. But those two guys, again, knowing how much they know, how well they know the business and how they treat themselves as leaders and not just, talent performing in the ring. Those two guys would be damn good NFL locker room leaders.
Right on.
I love that. I was going to say, I mean, maybe Roman just because of the football background, but no, I get the as far as vocal leaders, Cody and Punk make perfect sense 100% in that regard. We joked about Jacob Fatu before the show because Shaw does kind of look like him. I had to ask, he's got to be one of the most intense guys on the roster, but I also feel like he's got to be fun. Can you give me any insight on that without breaking too much?
Yeah, absolutely. Fatu, he was early on when we first started shooting, like I wasn't around him much. We just weren't around him much. It wasn't like a big target for us. But his character was great. And he was just starting to really get, ascend as a big character. Cause when we got into it, they were just starting to break down that big bloodline story and the OTC and with Solo as the new TC. So I didn't spend a lot of time around Fatu, like behind the scenes, if you will. But he was so intense. I was like, man, I can't picture this guy not like, and he didn't really talk a lot early, at least when I was watching it. He wasn't really doing a lot of promos or doing a lot of on-screen talking. So I was like, I had no idea what to expect from him as a human being. But once we got around him a little more, he's like a teddy bear, and he is a fun guy. He's like really loose and he's just an incredible wrestler. Like, I mean, there's nothing quite like it for me seeing a big guy like that, moonsaulting off the top rope or off of a cage and suspended up in the air. So, I mean, fun, yes, but he is extremely like passionate. Like passion is the other thing that I've sort of seen him exude around us, and like how much the business means to him, and doing it all with his family and all that. Like Fatu is, I love another one, man. Like it's just, I see Fatu in the hall and it makes you feel good. Like I just try to go say hi to him, and it's funny. I actually saw him when I was coming back from a shoot. I don't even remember which event it was, or I was going to Florida maybe from here. I don't even remember, but he happened to be on the plane, up in the front of the plane, and I didn't talk to him or say anything to him, but it was like, and then they get off and they got to go get their luggage and they got their gear, and it's like these huge cases, and I was like, and it was again like a little glimpse into what it's like to be a wrestler, and but he's a dude that, yeah, super fun guy to be around, and like I think he's genuinely, proud and like enjoying himself, in the business.
That's super cool to hear. And I love, by the way, you mentioned, he wasn't cutting as many promos at first. Once he started to, I've got a really good buddy from Northern California, and he uses all the NorCal slang. They sound exactly the same. It tickles me with the all gas, no brakes. Yada, I mean, like you hear a little Marshon Lynch in there occasionally.
Yeah. Even him having, even his like, the gear that they made for him, or his shirt, he got like the Raiders color, like football jersey with the back.
It's like an old school Ronnie Lott.
And actually, if I'm not mistaken, I saw that he had like a lot of the on the weekly shows that they do. Like I think he was in San Antonio. They had like a Spurs related shirt that had his logo on it and whatnot. So he's got a lot of marketability with that too.
it does seem like they're running with him right now, obviously, and him and Solo, which I think was like Money in the Bank when they first turned on each other. He turned on Solo, so they've definitely gotten a lot of mileage out of Fatu and the bloodline and the whole Samoan dynasty. Man, that's its own remarkable story.
I mean, he was like Jimmy Snuka holding my beer. He did a backflip off the cage.
Yeah, that was I was worried about it, man. And I think they were worried about it, especially because Bronson Reed had at Survivor Series. So when a big guy's going to jump that far, it's a spectacle, man. But but they popped right back up, and I was like, I think he's good, man. I think he's good.
He did it.
I thought that was a hold your breath. Like, oh. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Like that's one of the things that draws you in, right? As an audience member, and they got to push the boundaries because it's like, especially if you latch onto a character like that, it's like you want to see him wrestle every week. Just like, again, talking about football, you want to see the best players play football. You want to see Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. You want to see CeeDee Lamb playing receiver. So, you always hold your breath a little on the big moves for sure. But again, it's just evidence that they're doing that. It's working. It's compelling, and I care. And that's what storytelling is. It's drawing emotion and making the audience care.
100%. Well, before we take up too much of your time here, thank you. You've given us so much. We really do appreciate it. But before we let you go, do you have anything else you want to add? Anybody you want to shout out in particular, maybe from the team at Unreal or whatever? Feel free.
Yeah, I mean, a couple people. It's always dangerous to start thanking people because somebody's gonna get left out. But like internally, like I said, I can't say enough about Eric Powers and what his creative vision was. I keep telling you how little I knew, so I wouldn't have known where to begin, like with character and story and all that. And he was so thorough and had a really good plan. And it's like when you make documentaries and you make these kind of reality series, these follow series, it's really hard to like map things out and stick to it. You have to change on the fly, which again is part of their business, which we're trying to document, and then we have to change with it. And so Eric's setting us up for success, and like his creative vision and his storytelling, he drove the story for this thing. So he's the number one person to thank. And then there's just so many people to thank behind the scenes at WWE that's it's tough to get into everybody, but I will say a few people, Lee Fitting is just great to work with. And he had, gave us great inside input. Ben Hauser was my main contact, at least, especially early on. And there's a guy named Harley Glantz that's been like our day-to-day guy. Like when we need something, like we're planning shoots or we're doing this or that, Harley Glantz, again, probably very few wrestling fans know who that is, but those sorts of people make a show like this what it is. Like if you don't have that kind of support, that kind of help, and that kind of, those people are passionate and they've got drive and they know how to execute and communicate, like things that, really make a show go from like pretty good to what, special. It takes people like that behind the scenes. So too many to name, but there's a few right there.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate having you. Go Ponies. Absolutely. We can tell that story later. My mom's an SMU alum as well, for sure. But that is going to bring us to the end of the show. Check out Sunday Spotlight on Sundays at 10 o'clock in the UK. That's 5 o'clock East Coast and 2 o'clock here on the West Coast. But Chris Weaver, WWE Unreal, NFL Films, thank you so much. You're welcome on the show anytime. Trust me, after season 2, we're going to have you back. Now that we know, maybe. I'm kidding.
Mark Shot, thanks for having me, guys. It's a good time. Thanks.
Absolutely. And we'll talk to everybody soon. Have a good one.